Okay, we're recording. My name's Jeff Smith, and in this week's weekly database development web series, which you can find and subscribe to on YouTube, I'm going to be talking to you about Oracle SQL Developer version 4.1, which was released last week. So this is pretty much hot off the presses. If you would like to reach out to me, feel free to do so. My contact information is here. That's my email address, and right there beside that with the funny @ symbol, that's my Twitter handle. I spend way too much time on Twitter, but I like stalking our users on there, and they seem to enjoy it okay. So today's agenda, I'm not doing this anymore because I've just got too much stuff to talk about the past. But I am going to talk over new and improved features, and it's going to be slides plus live demo. We can take questions as we go. If you want to unmute and ask, feel free to do so. I don't know if your voice will come over on the recording. It probably should. If you don't want your voice included in the video, just use the chat mechanism to ask your question, and we'll address it that way. And with that said, let's jump into it. So what is SQL Developer? It's our, I have the word free there, but it's actually a database license included feature. So there's no additional cost to it. If you're using a free version of the database, it's free. If you're not using any database, if you download it off of OTN, your OTN license gives you access to it. So no cost is probably more accurate than free. It's a Java application, which means it'll run on Windows, OS X, and your Unix and Linux variants that support Java. Today I'll be demoing this on Windows 7, but I have running on my Mac right beside it. We have developers on the team that are across all of those three platforms, so we do put a lot of work into it to make sure it's not just running on those, but it's behaving well on those three platforms. But for our 4 million users worldwide, 85–90% plus of them are on Windows. Even though we're a no-cost option for your database, or free as the word up there says, you're covered by my Oracle support via your database license. So if you have a database under support with my Oracle support, you can open a service request with my Oracle support for SQL Developer itself. If you don't have that, you have the Oracle Technology Network, the community space, and its forums, where you can go on and ask questions, and you have fellow users there to help out, and I spend some time on there trying to help folks as well. SQL Developer also includes SQL Developer Data Modeler, which is also available as a standalone program. We also released version 4.1 of that last week, and I have a few slides in here to talk about that. SQL Developer started out as a project. We called it Raptor back in 2005, and then version 1, I think, technically shipped in 2006. But regardless, this is year 10 or year 11. We're not the new kids anymore, I don't think. And 4.1 came out last week. If you're watching this, or if you're watching a recording of this, and your version starts with a number other than 4, I really recommend you upgrade to at least 4.0.3. So I guess 4.1 would be bleeding edge. It's, you know, it's a couple of weeks old. 4.0.3 was the third patch set we had for version 4.0. And from version 4, or from version 3.2 to 4.0.3, it's probably got almost 1,000 bug fixes in it. It's extremely stable. It runs really, really well. I'm talking about 4.1 features, and I would love for you to be on version 4.1. But if you're on version 1.5 or 2.1 or something like that, and you're not feeling that brave, at least get up to version 4.0.3. And the good news is you can run multiple versions on your machine. You don't have to get rid of the version you have now and put down the new stuff. You can easily run both versions side by side. We have a new technology in SQL Developer. We're calling it SQLCL, which is a new command line interface, kind of like SQL Plus for the database. That's still an early adopter, so I'm going to talk about that. But when you go to download 4.1, that's not included with it. It's a separate download listed below on the download page. I will show you what it's about, but it's not ready for production yet. SQL Developer itself does require Java 8, so that would be a Java 8 JDK. It's a hard requirement. If you try to run this with Java 6 or Java 7, you'll get an error message and it won't let you pass go. We're using a feature that really requires Java 8 for it to be stable and reliable, and Java 8 runs great. Technically, Java 7 is being end of life in terms of support from Oracle anyway. Now, I know many of you are probably running applications that don't support or have hard requirements of their own for Java 6 and Java 7. So just very briefly, if you want, you can install as many versions of Java as you want on your machine. A lot of apps will pick up the location of Java via the path or library environment variables on your machine, so you might need to tweak those so installing Java 8 doesn't break those applications. And if you're really paranoid, which might be safe if you're in the IT space, you can always install or put down Java 8 on a different machine somewhere and just zip up that JDK home directory and unzip it inside of your SQL Developer install if you want. So it's not technically installing Java 8 on your machine, and the only application on your machine that would see Java 8 would be SQL Developer. So you can have your cake and eat it too, if you need to. I can't go over every single feature, so I'm going to summarize, I think, the things that I think are upgrade worthy. And this is also an excuse for me just to share with you one of my favorite movies of all time. If I have to tell you what movie that is, then we can't be friends. All right. So feature number one, this is, if you've heard us talk about the cloud, we do have a database service available, and in 4.1, if you have a 12C multi-tenant database in the database administration panel, you can right-click on a pluggable database and clone or move that up into your cloud service. It's a very simple dialog. What it does under the covers is not so simple. So it takes your pluggable database and changes its state such that it can be basically zipped up, or can build that series of files for it, and then we chunk those files up over secure FTP or SSH up to our cloud servers, reassemble everything back up, plug it in, start the database up, and then over here on the right, if you leave it to the default of replug, when it's finished that, it leaves your on-premise or local database. It puts it back up where you started. If you have it set to delete, it'll actually remove those local files. So there's obvious reason why we have replug as the default there. We have customers that might want to put copies of the database up into the cloud for development and testing for teams worldwide, and a single button click to do that we think is going to be Very, very convenient. So when you get to 12C, and if you're thinking about that, our mission here on the development tools team is to make the tooling as easy as possible for you to get the most out of your Oracle licensing, whether that be a traditional database license or a month-to-month cloud subscription. For most of you, that probably won't be something that you'll be using, but I got to do a little bit of marketing and sales here. So here's a feature that if you do much coding or typing in the tool, you might find this useful. You're going to be able to instantiate multiple cursors. So I was doing, I think, a Control-Shift-Click there to add the secondary cursor. So just a normal click and then Control-Shift-Click as many times as you want in as many different places as you want. So it kind of simulates block text editing like you may have seen in other editors like Ultra Edit. Although it's a little bit more flexible than that because you can actually add non-contiguous areas to do this. So if I jump over into SQL Dev, so here's a cursor, 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 here's a cursor. This doesn't make any sense, but it just gives you an idea of what you can do. Escape brings me back, and if I go undo, it actually brings those multiple cursors back, which I think is kind of cool. You can configure the keystroke for that. By default, it's the Control-Shift-Click, but in preferences, database might be here, somewhere here in the preferences. It's not in the keyboard shortcut preferences. You can find an entry there. I'll have to look it up. It's been a while since I've looked at that. But you can actually change the keystroke. The other editing thing, search and replace has been enhanced. So before, if you were in a SQL worksheet and you wanted to do a find or replace, you got a modal dialog. And I think this is going to be more user-friendly as well. So let me just put a bunch of text in here. Oops. A bunch of text in here. So if I want to look for every occurrence of the word SID, I can actually just put my cursor on SID and say Control-R for replace. And the replace string is already entered here. So it's automatically searching for SID, and you probably don't want to replace it with the same thing you searched on it for. And it's telling me there are 4 occurrences, and they're highlighted as well. If I want to replace that with SID, I can replace one at a time, or I can say replace all, and it will then give me a summary over here to the right. If I want to get rid of the find and replace toolbars, there's a little X widget over here you can click. The escape key is supposed to get rid of them as well. If you're just doing a traditional find, Control F will give you just the single bar. If I do that again, yeah, we have a search history. So if I do tweets, I've got the list of what I've looked for. We have support for regular expressions. You can do back searches via regular expressions, although we use dollar notation now to reference those back search hits. You can search just selected text, whole words only, and force matching of case. So I realize our editor is never going to be as whiz-bang as something like Ultra Edit or Notepad++, but we do know you spend a lot of time in here, and we don't want to have to force you out to those external editors if you don't want to. If you're looking for a tip or a trick, search my blog for how to plug VI into SQL Developer. You can actually have invoke VI from the worksheet and do all your typing in VI. And when you close that buffer, it all comes back into the editor. So you might find that useful. Another example of something we're just trying to make better, not necessarily a brand new feature. Working with flat files and Excel sheets that you want to import into the database. So if you right-click on a table and ask to do an import and point to an Excel file or a CSV or a delimited text file, something that wizard wasn't doing before was allowing you to see the data as you went and mapped the columns. So when you're asked to provide the date format, you weren't able to actually see the dates, so you could type those in. Let me see if I can demo that one really quick as well. They say live demos are where presentations go to die, and I'm like, well, let's live dangerously. I think it's just more fun. And this also gives me an opportunity to show another little tweak that we've added in 4.1. So anytime we're referencing a file dialog, we've added this drop-down to show files that were recently referenced in this dialog. So as soon as I pick that file, it automatically loads up the data stream. And that data stream continues throughout as we go. So here I can see it even still, so if I'm not sure which columns I want to grab. So we've done a lot in this dialog. The first thing we've done, these columns are in italics, and the italics means that I haven't actually reviewed that column yet. So if you're getting ready to import 100,000 rows to a table with 36 columns in it, you might spend 10 minutes looking at it and then forgetting, oh, which columns did I look at to see if they were mapped correctly and which ones did I forget? So as I click through these, they won't be italicized anymore. So here's a hire date, which is a date in the database. Here's how the date, or here's how the value is written in the file. And then up above, I need to make sure that that is represented properly with the proper or the right NLS date format, so we know how to write the insert statement. Go back. Let me show you what happens if you pick a bad. Hopefully I've got one in here with bad values in it. Nope. Well, if I did, for example, I've got an employee ID and certain values in that file obviously aren't numbers, they're strings. Within that preview window, we're loading like the first 50 or first 100 records just for you to look at. We'll let you know which rows will most likely be rejected. So that's a value that we know won't go in, but the rest look okay. So it's not a hard error like this is. A hard error would be like you haven't provided a date format. The previous version of this wizard had this data validation logic built into it, but it was at the very end and you optionally asked for it. So what we're doing now is we're auto-validating things as you go through the wizard. We just want you at the end of the wizard to just have your stuff go into the database as you'd expect. The other thing we're doing is making it reusable. So not only are you seeing the nice little widget here for referencing previous files, you can also go work through this entire wizard and save all of the work that you've defined here. So the file, the database, the connection, the fields, how it's getting imported. I can save that to a state file, basically an XML file. And then the next time I go to do this import, I can just click this restore button and it loads everything back in. So if you're doing the same import every few months or every few weeks, or hopefully not every few days or hours, you only have to click through this thing once if nothing else has changed. And if you actually want to make this a more programmatic process, we have a command line interface that now supports these import tasks. And the import task accepts that state file that we created, and then you can actually override any of those options. So if you've done the same import over and over again and it's all good, but for this case, the table name is different, you can actually feed it a different table name to use or a different database connection to use. And our developer took a lot of care in giving you lots of examples for exactly how to find the command line string. I'm going to talk about the SQLCL, or the new type of SQL Plus type command line interface. This is a separate command line interface. This is SDCLI, which is SQL Developer Command Line Interface. So it's a command line interface to the GUI features like database exports, running reports, formatting files, uploading carts to the cloud, or in this case, importing data. At some point, we might merge the two command line interfaces, but for now, we have two separate ones. This one's production. This one's good to go. The other one is still in beta. Here's a fun one. So there's a 12c feature called SQL Text Expansion, and we've just built that in to the IDE. Someone got excited when I showed them this the other day, and they went back to their desk to try to play with it, and they couldn't get it to work. They couldn't get it to work because they were connected to an 11G instance. So once you get up to 12c, you would have access to this. And what it does is it says for the current query, what would actually be ran in the database. So $GV session, I think, is a public synonym for a system view that references a whole bunch of other stuff. So when you mouse over that kind of grammar text, you get the pop-up bubble, and then if you click on that blue text in the pop-up bubble, it'll replace what's in the editor with what would actually run. This could be very handy, not just for answering, personal curiosity type questions, but if you're in a stored procedure and you see a select star against something and you're not sure what that is per se, you're not going to expand the text and replace it, but you can kind of peek into that query to see what's actually happening. Let me see if I can demo this really quick too. It gives me the one bubble, but not the second. Excuse me while I talk to myself. Personal prerogative. And it's the beauty of live demos. So there's two features here that are similar to each other. The SQL text expansion, you would see the yellow squiggle under the select. There's a second one here under the star, and that's actually been in there since version 4.0. This one's got a really long select list, so it doesn't fit. That just takes the asterisk and explodes it out to the full column list. The SQL text expansion one actually changes the query itself quite radically, not just the select list. Tuning, making queries go faster. It's a much easier task when you know where the bottlenecks are. Auto trace is a feature that's been in the tool for a long time. and it's this button right here, which actually runs the query with timing on, like set timing on, and some other things. We collect session statistics before and after you run the query, and then kind of delta those, and then bring all this back. So what's new for 4.1 is this concept of a hotspot, where we try to clue you into the plan steps that are problematic, where you'd want to concentrate on making it faster. So I think you can see that in the screen. It's on the far right, but yeah, so the way you read plans, if we were to collapse up these steps, it's basically saying a majority of the time being spent in this plan or this section of the plan is happening right here. So that's where we get the biggest bang in our buck in terms of tuning. If I keep clicking this button, it will advance me around in the plan to other problematic areas. So here's another issue it's found. So we've observed only 50 rows returned, but the database statistics indicate there should be 92,000 objects returned. That could be a red herring. If I go into my preferences and look at my auto trace and explain plan options, I have not said fetch all rows. That does exactly what it sounds like. It basically fetches all rows down to dev null, but it reads all of the data out of the database. So if I do an auto trace again, this takes longer because we have to read all of that data back. So instead of 2 seconds, it's taking 6 seconds now. As I go through the hotspots again, I'm not seeing that cardinality hit. I'm seeing this cardinality hit where it's expecting 1, but actually got 32,000. So that's kind of a big deal. Might want to refresh my stats or try to rewrite the plan such, because if the optimizer is way off on this, it's not going to have a good chance of building a good plan to begin with. I know 4.1 just came out, but I always get questions, what's next? We're kicking around the idea of building a new way of looking at explain plans, so they're hopefully just easier to read. But one baby step here is this concept of the hotspot, where it kind of takes you around the parts of the plan that make sense for you to start with in terms of performance tuning, instead of just concentrating on all of it at once. This is one of my favorite new features in 4.1. So this is brand new. Via the JDBC driver itself, we're actually able to log all of the activity that goes across over to the database. So if you're ever curious what SQL Developer is doing under the covers while you are clicking around in the GUI, this is how to do that. So someone asked me, hey, how does the auto trace work? Well, we just did an auto trace. If I come back over here into view, log, and click on this new statements panel, I'll be able to see where it's set time statistics to true, session stats level to all, ran the query, got the query SQL ID, and got the stats, and then did a rollback. So that's actually what it's doing when you do an auto trace. And if you double click on one of these cells, you get a easier way of reading that. And you can also see where we're capturing the binds that are going over. as well as recording time spent. So this isn't seconds, this is milliseconds. So this is time spent from the client perspective, not from the database perspective. You can clear the log and a right click. You can also filter it. So I could just look for, oh, I don't know, the table that you're thinking that we're querying incorrectly. Or I can just do row number. Oops. Row number. It's case sensitive. I always forget that. Yeah. A lot of times people are saying, hey, I log in and I can't see my tables. I don't have any tables. And I have a hard time convincing them that they don't actually have any tables. So maybe now I can just say, hey, go look in the log, clear it, refresh your table node. Oops. And you can see what we're doing to go get your table list. We're actually doing something pretty complicated because we're showing all kinds of different types of tables, but it comes down to get everything out of, if you have access to it, DBA objects where owner equals you and object type equals table. And if nothing comes back, you don't have any tables. So this is a good way to teach yourself the data dictionary. It's a good way to, borrow RSQL and write your own reports with if you want, or it's a good way to just troubleshoot why you're seeing on the screen what you're seeing. You might be expecting something else. Okay, so for DBAs, I think this might be pretty popular. And this is what requires, this is kind of what pushed us to that hard requirement for Java 8, because it's using technology called Java FX that just works so much better in Java 8. Let me open it so you can see it for yourselves. So view DBA. So you're either a DBA or you're a developer with a really high level privilege in the data dictionary views. And if you come to the database status section of the DBA panel and you open DB instance, this is a real-time live refreshing view of all of the activity in your database. Or at least it should be. There we go. So we were always showing this information before, but we supplied reports that you would just run and refresh ad hoc as you needed to see, what current wait events were, or what table space or temp space storage looked like, or how many sessions were connected. So what this is, it's basically just a fancy report that's running all of that stuff all at once. And it's putting the data up in pretty high-level charts and graphs so you can keep a handle on things. And then if you say, okay, that's great, now actually let me drill into sessions, I can just double-click on this, and that runs the session report so I can see the nitty-gritty. A couple of tricks. If you're on a nicer setup, maybe you've got a couple of monitors, you can float this page, drag it over to your external monitor, we'll pretend that's this, go to full screen, and then click the fit. And that should give you the best possible view of what's going on in your system. The wait event class callers here should match up pretty accurately to how wait events are shown in other Oracle tools like Enterprise Manager or EM12C. And most of these should have the drill down reports. So if I had some block sessions here, those would show up in red, and I could double click and come into here and go kill that person or that person's session, I guess. And then I would come back over here and I would see that that lock event wait and the lock sessions metric, change on the fly, so I could know for sure that that was fixing the issue at hand. Back to the slide deck. So what I just did is all you need to do to run this. You just put down SQL Developer 4.1 and you open that screen, and assuming you have the privileges required to read that information out of the data dictionary, this thing works. We're not storing the data. We're not generating alerts and sending emails. It's just think of it as a fancy report. It's for ad hoc, hey, show me what's going on in my database type thing. You have drill downs. Eventually, instead of having those flat reports for the drill downs, each drill down will probably have a nice fancy, JavaFX kind of HTML5-ish type display. And for the boring background, we actually worked with our field performance experts. This was the data they want to see when they get called into a hot site or they get called into a deal where they have to make the system go as fast as possible. This is the type of information they want to see. So hopefully it's the type of information you want to see as well. For the next version, we'll probably try to build a rack type screen that shows a cluster and cluster activity and then allows you to draw down in the instance level. But we're looking to see how well this goes over for our individual instances first. So I'm going to take a breather here, check my chat for questions. Oh, someone's helping me out. Tool preferences mouse actions is where you can customize that multi-cursor. I like it when smart people try to help me. Preferences. Mouse actions. Yep. So instead of Control Shift click, you could change it to Alt click or the Windows hotkey click, or if you're on Mac, I guess that would be the Mac key click. All right, so this is our safe harbor statement because I'm going to transition over to talking about SQLCL. Basically, please don't make any buying decisions based on what I'm about to show you, even though what I'm about to show you is still no cost or free. So I know all of you are SQL Developer users, but you may know friends and family that prefer the command line, which is SQL+. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool to take the things that people like about the graphical user interface and the things that people like about SQL+ and marry them together, which is what we've done. So things like table name or column name completion are going to be supported here. Things like SQL history. So if I'm in a worksheet in SQL Dev, we record queries and you can recall those. We're going to support that in the command line as well. And that'll actually be recorded and saved across sessions. If I can run SQLCL right now and step through things I ran a few days ago with the keyboard or look at the entire list like you can see in this animated GIF. Let me actually load it up. SQLCL. Oh, cool, I'm already in there. But I haven't touched it in a second, so let's see if we're still connected. Probably should have warmed this thing up before I started into the demo. We're building new commands. So people like in SQL Developer, they can get the DDL script for objects. So we just created a command called DDL that does the same thing. Yeah, so if you type help when you run this, the new commands are highlighted. So we have CTAS, or create table as select. DDL, format, history, info. Info is a cool one. So info HR employees. Think of it as a new describe. I don't think of it as a new describe. It's a new describe. So, you know, employee ID is the primary key. We're marking that with an asterisk. You know, is it, are there any default values? What are the column comments? What indexes do we have? What are any referential integrity constraints? And I can say info plus, and instead of showing column comments, it'll show column statistics. So here's the SQL recall, just like I would see in SQL Developer. We also have better formatting, I think, by default, so you don't have to run a bunch of silly formatting commands. That's not good. What did I type wrong? So first name, last name, salary from HR. So tab, there's my completion. Fetch first 25 rows. Yep, so there's that output. And as I'm typing, I don't like select star from. I can actually use my arrow keys and just come in here into the buffer and change it live, which crazy, right? But for some reason you can't do that. I couldn't do that before. First name, last name, salary. Yep. There's a list of commands I've run before. If I want to go back to number 74, history 74, that's in the buffer / to run. There's my data. Maybe I want that back in CSV format. So set SQL format CSV, star from HR employees. Maybe I want JSON format. Trying to find a good query here. Sometimes it's easier just to type them from scratch, even with SQL history. There's my JSON format. DDL, demo, hockey stats. We'll spit out the DDL script, just like I would see in the table editor. We support spool, of course. So spool, run that, then run the DDL and take spool off. Then you've got your SQL script in a file. So again, all of this, we're still an early adopter. We've got lots of blog posts and some videos up if you want to learn more about it. It's not too far away off from getting released. I'm still in my meeting. Yeah. Okay. Weird. I don't see my actual little Zoom recorder. But I guess I'm in there. So where was I? Yes. This is not early adopter. This is still 4.1 production ready stuff. Oracle REST Data Services is a separate technology or product. It used to be called Oracle Apex Listener. But what it basically allows you to do is define RESTful services that marshal, web server or web requests into database requests and sends the data back down to your client or your iPhone or your web page or whatever down in a JSON format. So JSON's kind of the new standardized way of, sending data around. And what we're doing in SQL Developer 4.1 with Oracle REST Data Services is just making it much easier to REST enable your database. So inside of SQL Developer 4.1, you'll actually be able to install REST Data Services and configure it all inside the UI. So I've already installed it. And I've created a RESTful service. I've created a module called Thirsty and a RESTful endpoint that when I call allows me to get, so if I were to make this call right here, it would send back in a paginized format, 25 rows at a time in JSON, the results of this query. Yeah, here we go. So if I were to run this, so rating's a bind variable. I want all of my 3.5 star beers. And that'll take a second because I haven't ran this in a while. If I decide at some point, I want the records to come back in groups of 10, or I don't want the same number of columns. Oh, great. I must have broke it. But it's very, very easy to come in here and just change the definition of the RESTful service in this module. And the other cool thing I can do is just automatically REST enable database objects. So I can REST enable this table, and we're not going to call it that. We're going to call it something else. And we'll require authorization, so just not anyone can make that call. It's a very simple PL/SQL API that allows you to do this stuff. And as soon as I've done that, I'll be able to tell my web developers, and they'll start be able to making those REST requests. Yes, that's what that's supposed to look like. And we have a report in there as well, so you can see what all objects in your system you've REST enabled, if you're curious. And we'll take another second here just to pause. All There we go. I guess that was all of the 4.1. Oh, I'm missing something big. It's not big. It's actually pretty simple, but it's very, very cool. So allow me to show this very quickly. Data modeler is included in SQL Developer, but and if you wanted a quick and dirty relational diagram, there's actually a way where you can start up a new model and drag and drop a table into it, and we'll reverse engineer it and show you all the cool stuff. But the new thing you can do is you actually open and split this. If you open any table now, there's a new panel. So columns, data, and then here's the new one, model, which does just what it sounds like. It'll look at any foreign keys defined on this table, and it will build for you on the fly a relational diagram. So you can see just how this table is related to everything else in your database. So the table that we're looking at that we opened is actually highlighted in red here. And you can open the properties on these tables as well. Now you can't make any changes here. I can't export this out. I can't do anything model design related. This is just to show me the diagram. If I want to do any of that other stuff, then I would click this button and it'll start a new data modeler design based on these objects, and then I can go do all of the data modeler stuff. Okay, so that's a nice transition to, oh, by the way, if you're in here and you don't see any other boxes and lines, it means you don't have any foreign keys on your table, and you need to have a nice firm talk with your developers about why foreign keys are a good idea in a relational database. Okay, so Data Modeler 4.1 itself, just a few minutes here. It's maybe a trivial thing, but so much time is spent putting together these diagrams. You might want to be able to brand or watermark or label or add custom pictures to your diagram. So you can now do that. There's a new toolbar button where you can add any image to these. Just don't go overboard and crazy. If you add really huge ones, obviously it'll take them longer to load. That's just a little nice touch feature. Customers have been asking for a while now, and you might not be aware of this, but in, I want to say 10G or 10GR2 of Oracle database, we made it so you could actually define foreign key or referential integrity constraints on views themselves. So if you wanted to abstract out for someone any of the tables and they're just looking at views, they might still want to a diagram showing how the views are related, and now you'll be able to do that. So we now support the actual constraints on the views themselves, and we draw the view relationships. Although under the covers, it's still all being defined and enforced on the table level. We've got support for custom DDL generation for your objects. So you can say after these tables are created, automatically, generate this DDL. And as an example, we now support journal tables. So if you want to add a record to a table every time someone adds or changes or deletes a record in a table, you don't have to spend time in your designing the journal tables. We can just build those for you automatically. That's the example, but you can add your own custom scripting. So we have before create, after create, end of script, and instead of create. So for one or more objects before they're created, do this. For one or more objects after they're created, do this. for the entire script at the very end, run this. And for one or more objects, instead of using your create, use my create. So just added flexibility there. Obviously, you're versioning your designs, which is always good. So just better support in the design tool itself for the versioning interface, so you can see what objects have been touched, what objects have pending changes. So when you go to do a commit, you know exactly what you're committing, or maybe what objects have changed you need to go take a look at. You'll just see those decorators here in the tree. And a lot more. So I am going to say thanks to everyone. You don't have to bounce off right away. I'm going to stop the recording once I find the button for it. And then if people want to ask questions,